Donald Trump today threw his support behind a bipartisan effort to address some of these critical issues with what is called the First Step Act. And this act was passed by the U.S. House. It was championed and led by Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He also worked very closely with Jared Kushner, whose father served time in federal prison and has been a huge proponent of this particular bill. Now, the stumbling block for the Trump administration was actually Jeff Sessions. He, as you just heard, was a hardliner, fought this thing left and right constantly before it was even being crafted. Now, here's the issue. What Trump did was, in order to satisfy Republicans, he chose to push off this bill until after the midterm elections. Here's the problem. You now have Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is saying they may not have enough time to actually get the bill through. Well, why in the hell did you delay it? So many senators have not even seen the bill. The other issue with this particular bill is that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, she was one of the folks who voted against it. She wants more changes to it. But they were able to move this forward because the split in the House and the Senate, Chuck Grassley, who heads the Senate committee, he also wanted it to deal with the issue of mandatory minimums. Same thing with Dick Durbin of Illinois. Senator Cory Booker, he still has some issues with this bill. But right now, you do have bipartisan support. But McConnell, though, is saying that he needs the 60 votes to get it passed. I want to bring up my pal Lawn Victoria Burke, a writer for National Newspaper Publishers Association, NPA. Also, Joe Madison, host Joe Madison Show on Sirius XM Radio. Malik Abdul, Republican communications consultant. And folks, this is, first of all, it's called the First Step Act. Democrats have been calling for quite some time for a strong criminal justice reform bill. Joe, one of the mistakes that they made was they had a strong bill that could have been passed before Obama left office. They assumed Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then they said we can get an even stronger bill. Well, she lost. Now you're left in a situation, Republicans can control the House, control the Senate.
Yeah, Democrats control the House.
No. Democrats don't control the House until January.
Well, yeah. Oh, you mean now?
Right now.
Oh, yes, right now.
So right now, Republicans still control it. And so they're looking to try to get this thing done before the new Congress takes over. The issue is, will you have enough Democrats stand back and block this from happening now that they have actually regained the House? Your thoughts?
Well, that's the big question, and that is, will the Democrats hold fast on this? I suspect, in short, that they will, only because they have the upper hand, 2 months from now. So the thing we need to encourage them to do is to hold tight. That's really where we are at this point, because if they don't, then that blue wave really doesn't matter much to any of us.
Now, Lauren, initially this was only really going to be about prison, affecting only a handful of federal prisoners. But because Senator Dick Durbin was a holdout on the Senate side, they had to make some changes. And so when you look at some of the changes, they had to add the issue of mandatory minimums in this deal. And so one of the things that they're saying, they're going to be shortening those sentences, and also for some nonviolent offenders, but also changing the 3 strikes law. Instead of it being from life in prison, now will be up to 25 years. Again, Jeff Sessions and other people like Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who are the hardliners, they are still going to fight this. And so even though Donald Trump today, through his support behind it, is not guaranteed, I'm going to get your comment after we play this comment from Trump today at a news conference at the White House.
Working together with my administration over the last 2 years, these members have reached a bipartisan agreement. Did I hear the word bipartisan? Is that, there you go. Did I hear that word? Huh? That's a nice word. Bipartisan agreement on prison reform legislation known as the first step. And that's what it is. It's a first step, but it's a very big first step.
Along the weird thing here, you get people like the Koch brothers and their foundation who align with folks like Van Jones and others who believed in criminal justice reform, who were pushing Republicans on this. And then hardliners are going, wait a minute, what the hell? We're not used to seeing y'all joining forces.
Yeah, well, I think this is actually an example of some fairly good bipartisan work on the part of Doug Collins, a Republican in the House, and Hakeem Jeffries, Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. It is interesting to think about Dick Durbin and mandatory minimums. When they did the crack cocaine disparity mandatory minimum, he didn't fight particularly hard for that. But once once a Republican gets in office, now he's fighting for it. But hey, whatever it takes. It does have a little bit of sentencing and a little bit of stuff that is hard to implement unless you fund it, like the stuff about expanding days in halfway houses and vocational training. You need funding for that, so you have to be appropriating that money every Congress. That kind of makes it difficult. But the thing about criminal justice reform and sentencing reform is that we got to be the #1 incarcerator in the world incrementally over a 30 and 40-year period, and you wind that back very, very gradually. It's definitely better than nothing. A lot of people say, oh, it doesn't go far enough. Obviously, Cory Booker did put out a Dear Colleague in May saying that. You were saying
fired back at him.
He fired back hard, and he was right, because Hakeem Jeffries was right, because doing something is better than doing nothing. Right. I'm not sure why Cory Booker was, other than the fact that there is a Republican in the White House, I couldn't figure out what the motivating factor there was. You'd mentioned Jared Kushner before. He had sat down with a bunch of journalists back on May 1st. I sat down with him for an hour, and I'm sure you did around the same time. I actually talked to him this morning about this, and unfortunately it's off the record, so I can't say what he said. But suffice it to say that again, these are not huge changes, but it's definitely better than nothing.
Malik?
Yeah, I think it's great, and this is one of those instances where the administration, every day we kind of get caught up in what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth, but forget that the federal government still moves along.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. This is something that we've been looking at since early spring. As it passed out of the House, some of the things that I'm interested in are the home confinement rules, changes to home confinement rules. I think it was 360 to 59 votes, I think, out of the House. That's as far as bipartisanship, I think that's actually a great thing. One of the other things that I'm excited about with this is it actually reduces prison time ahead of time as opposed to at the end of it. Those are things as far as sentencing reform that we can get behind. I'm looking forward to it. I think the administration is right to push it. Jerron, everybody knows Jerron K. Smith at the White House. Jerron has been pushing this for a while, so I'm looking forward to it. I would probably say, as far as Cory Booker is concerned, is that he's running for president.
Can I just add one other point, because what everybody's saying is right, and I think we should applaud this bipartisanship. But let me go back to one thing. I think one of the reasons you've got this bipartisanship state by state is something we learned a long time ago. This has been extremely expensive.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is, look, always follow the money.
Yeah.
I don't care if you live in a red state or a blue state. What has happened is that we have found out, and we knew this years ago, that this has cost states big time money.
Yep.
Well, that's definitely true. Texas learned that and started wheeling things back.
Well,
but it's
Texas,
interesting
Kansas, Republican governors. Lauren, I had a major civil rights leader in 2012 tell me that they had more support for Republican governors on sentencing reform and prison reform than the Democrats.
Yeah.
Because the problem is the Democrats did not want to be attacked with, oh, you're being soft on crime. The Republicans were saying, we can't afford this. I remember on an episode of Washington Watch, I had a brother who was out of Baltimore who was angry with that. And so he said, well, it should be the moral law, the moral reason. I said, bruh.
Morality has nothing to do with this is money.
If the Democrats see it as moral and the Republicans see it as fiscally responsible, I don't give a damn how you arrive at it. I said, if you are impacted by it, it don't matter.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true with the money. It's interesting to flip through Cory Booker's Dear Colleague from May 17. One of his biggest gripes right at the top of the letter was that the civil rights groups were excluded. He lists the ACLU and the NAACP, that they were not in the conversation. And I'm not saying they should not have been in the conversation. It would have been nice if they had been. But to me, that is not a substantive reason to be against a piece of legislation, particularly in a country that leads the world in incarceration, or the rate of incarceration. But one of the biggest issues, too, in this bill, it was sort of problematic for everybody, is the issue of retroactivity. There's nothing retroactive in the bill. And typically when you do have a sentencing reform bill and they change something in the law with regard to sentencing, they do make it retroactive. So that was a big sticking point for the Democrats. And I get it. But again, it is better than nothing. It definitely is better than nothing.
And again, to everybody who's watching, first of all, what we're going to do over the next several days is literally break this bill down so you fully understand. Because I can tell you, when after I met with Jared Kushner back in May, I had lots of conversations with Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and others. I had talked about this on the Tom Jordan Morning Show and also had tweeted about it when I was at one of the Houston Rockets playoff games against the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. Boy, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee was not happy at all and hemmed me up in the club under the stadium. And I just told her point blank, I said, Congresswoman, you're gonna have to. I said, you keep telling me it's bad. You're going to explain to me how the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Cedric Richmond, voted for
endorsing it.
You're going to explain to me how Congressman Jim Clyburn, the highest-ranking African American, is voted for it.
Well, Sheila Jackson,
so that means there were blacks who were on that committee who voted for the House bill.
Sheila Jackson Lee is problematic. She is for mandatory minimums. Try to get her to talk about mandatory minimums. Try to get her to say that she's against mandatory minimums. And one of the things that is problematic, if you say you're for meaningful sentencing reform, you have to have a conversation against mandatory minimums, which is a conversation she won't have. And she's probably going to be chair, I believe, of the crime committee once again under House Judiciary. So that's a problem. That's a huge problem. One of the other issues that Cory Booker had was that the bill gave too much discretion to Jeff Sessions, specifically Jeff Sessions, not just the Attorney General, right?
But to Jeff Sessions.
Now that Jeff Sessions is gone, and when the minute Sessions walked out, I emailed Jared Kushner. I said, "Your bill is going to move because Jeff Sessions was a major problem.
Oh, no. Jeff Sessions,
major
Jeff Sessions
problem.
was fighting this thing tooth and nail.
Right.
And the White House,
and
you talk to them, they said he was a problem. He was constantly trying to block it.
Yeah.
And it was like they were doing end arounds with Trump. Like, okay, keep Sessions away from him on this, so he won't even listen to him because he literally was, he didn't want any of this.
And anything that reduces the number of people behind bars, Jeff Sessions was against. That's why, as you mentioned, Tom Cotton, all eyes on Tom Cotton because he's another one. So is Ted Cruz. But if they got this far and they've got the president up there, something is about to happen.
And one of the things, and
Joe.
Just one more quick thing. We're here in the District of Columbia. And one of the things that's in the bill is that they were, I think it's, you can't, an inmate can't be housed outside of 500 miles of their
that was
home.
a big.
You know, which you think about it, you say to yourself, wow, this is something. So with D.C., we don't have a jail here in D.C. So, you know, our relatives could be sent to California. But those are like simple things. It's not a perfect bill.
Yeah, the relatives in your inmates in D.C. are sent to California.
Oh, wow.
And they are sent to Oklahoma. But here's the other thing. You know, in that New York Times piece you wrote with Jeff Sessions, you know, it really stood out for me when he talked about the sovereignty of this. It's states' rights.
Right.
That's what he's referring to. It's once again him holding up states' rights. And let us also keep in mind, the more prisoners that you have in these states, the more you get to use them to do what? You get to use them as free labor.
Goes back to the peonage system.
And that's exactly what we're dealing with.
Now, also, last point here, folks, do understand, this is a federal bill. It only impacts about 200,000, actually not all 200,000, but any federal bill dealing with prisons only impacts about 200,000 people. There are 2.3 million people who are in prison or local jails in America. 2.1 million are state and local. And so this is not going to impact those state and local folks. But what it does, though, the federal government taking this position, you do have, and I hate using the phrase because we think about Reaganomics, it has a trickle-down effect. So when the federal government makes changes, then states then begin to look at this and also begin to make changes as well. And so we'll certainly, again, keep you up to date on what happens with this particular bill. Let's go.